Welcome to the Fibromyalgia podcast with me, health and wellness editor Verity Clark. Fibromyalgia is a chronic pain condition which goes largely undiagnosed and for which there is currently no cure. Yet in the UK alone, it is estimated that around 1.5 million people are sufferers. Poor diagnosis and zero cure means suffering in silence is a common theme in the chronic pain community. Created in conjunction with the Fibromyalgia Magazine, this podcast aims to break this silence because we believe that the more we share, the more ways we will discover for fibromyalgia sufferers to lead happier, healthier lives. We'll be covering and oversharing everything you ever wanted to ask about fibromyalgia, but didn't know who or where to turn to, with conversations with some of the most interesting and thought-leading people, both within as well as outside of the fibromyalgia space, to give you information, insight, and inspiration for diagnosing and coping with fibromyalgia. Because even though something is invisible, that doesn't mean it should be kept in the dark. This week I'm talking to Melissa Talwar. Diagnosed with fibromyalgia at the age of 14 years old, Melissa spent over 20 years declining in the medical system, with no hope of improving. A former Olympic hopeful, she found herself cyclically bedbound, with severe pain, brain fog, fatigue, and stomach issues. It wasn't until her mid-20s that she found health again, through biohacking, functional medicine, and books by Dave Asprey, Dr. Dale Bredesen, Dr. Terry Walls, and Dr. Ben Lynch. She figured out her personal 36-variable formula that helped get her brain back, decreased pain, and made laundry possible again. Melissa now dedicates her life to making sure other people don't have to go through this on their own, like she did. She is a qualified functional medicine health coach and in 2017 founded the non-profit organisation Support Fibromyalgia, which lobbies for patient advocacy and better answers for the fibro community. Her work has taken fibro education to patients across the country and to legislators at Capitol Hill. We have gone transatlantic this week and we are recording over Zoom and over different time zones, so apologies if there are any audio issues. I'm delighted to welcome all the way from California, Melissa.
Yes.
Welcome, how are you?
I'm doing good. We're hanging in here with all this stuff that's been going on for the last year. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I could do with seeing someone other than my family, but other than that, I can't complain. So I came across you during my research for this podcast, and it quickly became apparent that you are quite the activist in the fibromyalgia community in the US. And I think it's really interesting for a community like the fibromyalgia one that we have now got this hyper digital connected forum, so we can do things like podcasts and social media, and people from all over the world can share their stories and get advice, because it's a condition which is still so misunderstood and it relies so much on patient research and patients reaching out to each other. So I'm really excited for you to share your story with our listeners. So let's start at the beginning. So it's been quite the journey for you. You were diagnosed when you were about 14, is that right? Can we go right back and can you maybe share your story of what happened and how the diagnosis came about?
Yeah, I had always been a sort of sickly child, just to go back even into my early childhood days. Nothing was ever too chronic where it inhibited me from doing what I wanted to do. But I always had severe allergies. I had growing pains, which I just thought was a normal part of life. I thought walking around at Disneyland, by the end of the day, I was in terrible pain. And I just thought every child had that similar experience. So I didn't really think anything of it. I played sports. I was really competitive. I was competitive academically, top overachiever basically, because I started competing in track and field at 10 years old. So I was doing state competitions by then. So really, I didn't feel anything was stopping me in the way. But I transitioned to high school, and like I said, I'd done sports before, so I didn't really think anything was going to change or be any different. And trying out for the volleyball team my freshman year, I ended up falling. We were diving for the ball. The coach really had this mindset where he even had us call him a drill sergeant. So we were all over the place. I mean, all the girls were exhausted. We were sore. We could barely stand up. And I know I had, fallen weirdly when I tried to get the ball. So I kind of felt twerks, but I just wasn't walking properly. So that was 3 days. But on the third day, being that I was really tired, we were doing some football type exercises where they have that football machine where you have to like try to push it, like weighs over whatever I was weighing.
Right.
And
football, do you mean American football?
Yes, American football. So the idea is you're supposed to push this thing across the field. And at that time, I was so sore. I was really tired. And what I did was I accidentally conked my head where I blacked out. Oh. So I'd given myself a concussion, and I just never seemed to recover after that point. I was sore all the time. I could barely walk. My mom had to dress me in the mornings to get to school. And everything was just at that point terrible, like sleep issues, chronic pain. So that's how it all started. And it just didn't get the help that I needed early on at all.
So it all stemmed from a sports injury. So were you ever putting two and two together? Did you think this is just the effects of a sport injury? How long was it then until you kind of started thinking, actually, this is something totally separate?
I didn't realize it till later on. I think all this stuff, when I started to fall apart, was just all this guilt because I just focused on what I couldn't do. So I went from an overachiever to just struggling in class. I could barely remember anything. I could barely walk to class, especially get up any stairs. So I didn't really put two and two together until much later.
Yeah.
Even now, in understanding, oh wait, I had a really bad concussion because I didn't even factor that in. To having a head injury and how they used to treat it back then. So this was 1994,
right.
And how we didn't observe concussions the same way and how I might have treated it differently. I don't even remember getting any scans back then until maybe MRIs till like 4 years later when it got really bad.
So what happened? They just kind of put you on a standard course of medication and rest and recovery and told you to kind of get on with it?
Correct. That's basically what it is. Take the Tylenol, or maybe they give me something else. I mean, at this point, this is when I was starting to see doctors because the pain wasn't going away.
Can you describe the pain? Was it all over your body, or was it kind of located?
This was all over, and I just struggled, especially with my legs. I can't even sit or walk. I was holding on to anything that I could, even in school, just trying to get up the rails. I stopped actually going to some of my classes that were up the stairs because I couldn't make it anymore. I just was, and I didn't know how to ask for help. So this was a big thing. I mean, my mom was dressing me, so she was having to put the clothes on me in the morning, and I ended up missing a lot of school, and it just got worse as the doctors added more medication. Because there were heavy dosages, and I ended up being overly medicated on stuff that they wouldn't even prescribe to anyone today.
So you were still in school. How was it affecting kind of you mentally? I mean, it seems that it could have been quite isolating, and if you're missing classes, and you were an Olympic hopeful, right? So you'd also had kind of your dreams of being a sporting superstar taken away from you. So that's a lot to take on as a young child.
I was already struggling with mental health because, again, everything had been taken away. Being an overachiever, just always a straight A student, doing everything that I could, and now I was stuck. I didn't know, and I was at a very competitive all-girl private school, so everyone was an overachiever like me. And I did feel isolated. I did not know what to do. And I pushed. I did whatever I could to just stay normal. Mm-hmm. I did end up in 1996, like you mentioned, as an Olympic hopeful. I got to carry the Olympic torch in the relay. I still have the torch. But after all of that, they sent me home in a wheelchair and just told me they had no idea what was going on. I think they ruled out other conditions at the time. I don't even remember how things were ruled out in the 90s if you had like MS or other neurological conditions. But they weren't sure if I was ever going to walk again at that point. So they had me go through some physical therapy to try to help, which did. But they really didn't know. And that diagnosis of fibromyalgia like loosely was stuck around me, even though they kept saying, well, we don't really see this in younger people. But that's what stuck for so long.
So at this point, you're about 16, you're in a wheelchair, and you've kind of maybe been told that you potentially have fibromyalgia. So then, had you ever heard of this condition before? Did you know anybody with it? Could you find any kind of a support group?
No, I had just loosely been able to try to find some information, but nothing at that time. It would be a few years later in the early 2000s where I was able to connect with another organization based for fibromyalgia.
Yeah, so let's fast forward to then. So at this point, you've had about, what, 10 years of living in chronic pain, being heavily dosed up on medication, and then you decided to take matters into your own hands.
Actually, we have to fast forward for a lot longer because I had to survive college, which was the worst experience ever. And I don't even remember how I graduated with a biomedical degree because I was pre-med. I was still determined to do what I wanted to do. But again, it's just all of that depression. I was struggling. I was overly medicated even in college. So that segment of time and all the adversity I had to face to try to figure out how to manage college classes.
Yeah.
I had to do a hearing in front of the dean to even be a part-time student later, but just memory issues, managing, you're trying to have fun when you're in college as well. But I couldn't keep up. So
were you able to build friendships and things?
Little bit. I struggled a lot because people didn't understand. I always had this cyclical issue where I could maybe go for a few months and look fine, but then I'd fall bedbound.
Yeah.
So I'd just be this cyclically bedbound, and I couldn't figure out and how to manage it appropriately with all the energy. And people would see me. I tried to do different things like work out at the gym and you do kickboxing. So oh, you're a kickboxer, which also didn't help for blows to the head.
Oh, God.
But then all of a sudden I'd just be completely incapacitated, or I'd show up with mobility devices like a cane, and my friends they just thought I was lying, some of them. So there were a few that stuck with me, and I appreciate them quite a bit. I wouldn't have been able to survive without them, but it was difficult for other people to understand.
Yeah, you mentioned people thinking that you were lying. I think maybe that's one of the biggest problems with having something that's so misconceived, is that, or a hidden illness, because people think you're being lazy or you're just making it up, or and it's so hard to kind of counteract that and prove them wrong, particularly when you don't have a set diagnosis or you can't show people facts and figures and things. So that must be really hard to kind of deal with when you know so clearly that something is wrong with you, but you can't share it with everyone else.
Well, and the worst part too in that time period was the different medications that doctors were testing on me, because I didn't understand side effects at all at that point. But I was having probably very bad side effects, and some of them were very apparent, especially with my roommate. I started sleepwalking on some of the sleep meds, which was really dangerous and freaked them out.
I bet.
I had a roommate kick me out because she was scared because I was doing weird things in the middle of the night, besides trying to drive and fight people if I didn't get, I was really sleepwalking.
Wow.
So it's those, you lose friendships based on that, or erratic mood changes because of these medications. They had me on painkillers, antipsychotics, antidepressants, this full cocktail at the same time. And I'm barely in my 20s and weighing less than 100 pounds. So it's just, wasn't working properly at all.
And nobody at any point kind of came in and said, look, actually, this is too many drugs doing too many different things, counteracting each of the effects out. This is not good. This could be dangerous.
That only happened later. In my mid-20s, I was fortunate to find some mental health professionals, and one of them was trained in chronic pain. His dad works in pain management. He's at Scripps Museum in San Diego. And so he was more familiar with it, and he looked at everything. He was just appalled. He's like, I don't understand what happened here. Why didn't anyone stop you? So he began to work with me on adjusting, but that's where it's even so. He saw how sensitive I was to medications, even when he was trying to replace some other things with what may have worked for fibromyalgia, but he really had to work with me, and he noticed how sensitive I was right away. But it really helped to have someone actually pay attention to the medications I was on.
Yeah. So was it a talk that you went to that opened up a whole new world of possibility to you, and you kind of discovered a community of biohacking and this whole new world? Talk to us about that.
Okay, so you have to fast forward all the way to 2017, April of 2017. I was at the end of the road. I just had a doctor tell me that I wasn't going to be around for much longer.
Why did he say that?
He told me that my tests were weird. I mean, to go 2016, I was really struggling. So I was, again, wheelchair bound. I was tethered to a bathroom because my stomach was a mess. But the worst of it all was my brain. I was really feeling that I was losing something like cognitively, and no one was taking me seriously because I was driving. I would get lost trying to get home. And this is a house I had lived in since I was 2 years old. So everything was getting different. My math skills were terrible. And then also it's just, I found myself spacing out where I was just staring off into just nowhere. So I had seen I had seen an important integrative specialist spend whatever last savings I've had. Because a lot of people, you have to pay out of pocket to see them. And the results, he said, were weird. I had weird blood tests, but he just said, I think your body's just giving out on you. It's been 20 plus years. Go home and make the best of whatever time you have left. He said he could go into more details of the blood test if I paid for more of his time, but he didn't feel it was important, so he sent me home.
Oh no, it wasn't at all. Just your life he's dealing with.
So I was devastated, but I didn't want to give up. I mean, I sort of stopped talking to people and just ate a lot of pizza at that moment, but luckily I came across
always helps.
I was looking at an episode of Shark Tank, and these guys were pitching a product with nootropics.
Right.
And I was like, what is that? For like brain stacks, like people use it. I was like, maybe this will help. So I started researching online. I came across bulletproof and biohacking. And it just so happened this guy who ran the company Dave Asprey was going to be doing a tour and a talk in Los Angeles. So I was like, okay, I got to try to get this. I got VIP tickets. Maybe I can ask him questions. So that's where it sparked. We got to go to the events, and that's where he talked more about biohacking. And I realized, wow, I can do this.
Okay, so to rewind a bit, it started with nootropics, and for the uninitiated, nootropics are substances which are thought to have brain-altering properties. So something like caffeine is considered nootropic, right? Because it can heighten awareness and things, which is where your bulletproof coffee comes in. So were you trying nootropics before you saw Dave Asprey speak?
No, I was just trying to figure out what was in the ingredients that was enhancing people's energy in the brain, because I always felt like I was dozing off or just losing that brain power, that it just was running out of energy. So I kind of just started with research, like what are these ingredients that are in these stacks? I mean, caffeine was a big one. So I was like, okay, well, I'm already drinking a pot of coffee, so this is it.
Yeah.
I don't know what is helping. But I looked at the ingredients with like MCT oils when that came up. And the irony of everything was that I had been to a food blogger conference, and they gave me a free kit of bulletproof coffee because they had opened up in Santa Monica. So that's where I started tasting the brain octane and the MCT oil. And I was like, oh, there's something to it. I don't know. My brain just really enjoyed it. And so that's where I was just starting my research before I wanted to try anything. But there's other elements to it with mitochondria and looking at that and trying to figure all of that out. I was just doing more research at that point.
So, I mean, was it a case of you had a bulletproof coffee and then you thought, yeah, my brain's sharp after this? Or it's not as simple as that?
I noticed some difference with the brain octane because I tasted it separately because I wanted to make sure I didn't ruin my coffee. I didn't start with the butter or the ghee right away at all. I was really focused on the brain octane. And so I did start to slowly notice that I was making changes, and I started to read too with like intermittent fasting to understand what was actually going on. But then just, I think diving deep into it was the big thing when he talked about biohacking and just changing. I was like, oh wait, I have a pre-med background. I can do this science. So for me, biohacking meant taking control of my health again. I think I had run around in circles so much going to doctors and looking for them to help save me with the answers. And it just hit me that I was like, I can figure this out. There may be something that they missed. What can I do to help myself? And I gave myself the power back because I had just been defeated. I mean, I would cry after leaving doctor's offices and everything. So that's where it dawned on me that I actually had more power than I was giving myself credit for.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so what actually is biohacking in the simplest terms?
Well, for me, I interpret it as something like I could get my power back. And I know with Dave asked for his definition, it's changed because it's different. I know there's some controversy around it. I'm not talking about injecting myself with CRISPR or anything like that. But his is like the biohacking is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside you so you can have more control over your own biology. So that's more of what we're going after. And diving deep into other things like my genetics, I looked at some of that too in the process, but supplements, going more natural, were there things that I could change in my lifestyle that would make a difference?
So it's a case of really understanding your body on a really kind of granular level and then figuring out the tweaks to manipulate it to perform at its best.
Correct. And personalizing it for you and knowing what works for you, which was the big step forward. And from there, I just learned more about functional medicine and started following the people because he had a podcast. So I was listening every night, even if I just lying there, whatever I could put into my brain, I was utilizing with his interviews. And he had talked about Dr. Terry Walls in his book and Dr. Dale Bredesen. And those are the moments where it hit me on my biohacking wall. I put all the test results I possibly could collect, had a biohacking wall, and was starting to look at patterns. So even if my brain worked for 10 minutes during the day, I would use that 10 minutes just to see if there was anything that I could come up with.
And then you found patterns that your doctors had missed.
Yes, well, it was a perfect storm of timing with like reading the Headstrong book to him saying that there was a Dr. Terry Walls who hacked her own mitochondria with MS, Dr. Dale Bredesen who was working with Alzheimer's patients. So again, I was heavily focused on my brain. Everyone had tried to focus on my gut and my thyroid, and I just really was concerned that I was going to lose my brain. So that was my focus a lot, and then seeing patterns in my test results. I think doctors they discounted some of the levels, and so I found that out when I read Dr. Bredesen's book because he put some optimal values. And I noticed all his 36 variables, and I didn't have a complete set, but I was under optimized. So I either had values that were low, high, or just completely just out of range for what I should have had in his reference. So I used that, and I had seen that people really discounted my inflammation markers, even though they were extraordinarily high.
And they were extraordinarily high.
Huh?
So why was it being missed then? Or is it just that the ranges just aren't accounting for, the ranges just aren't big enough?
Well, I think when we talk about normal, what's normal for you is different. So some of the ranges, maybe I was just slightly out of range, and especially for inflammation markers like sed rate and CRP, I was actually slightly out of range. It was high, but everybody just told me don't worry about it. Same with my glucose. I was always kind of out of range. But they said, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal because you're not really high, like if you're showing more of an autoimmune condition. Although in my 30s, a rheumatologist said I did have something autoimmune starting, but the markers, again, weren't conclusive and they weren't high enough to cause concern, according to them.
But you knew that there was something going on. So when you had your biohacking wall and you started to see these patterns, what sorts of things did you then start adopting and putting into your everyday life that you saw were working?
I used the two books, which I talk about a lot, was the Bredesen Protocol and the Walls Protocol, to give me a roadmap. So with the Bredesen Protocol, there were all these variables that he talked about, which actually are so similar to fibromyalgia. I read that book, and I really felt that this was talking to me about fibromyalgia, because the different types, how we have nutritional deficiencies, especially with vitamin D, thyroid, hormone, mitochondria deficiencies, gut health, sleep. Sleep was a big focus in the book. So, and then he referenced some supplements in there, which I had never tried before, like glutathione, liposomal glutathione, and no one had ever told me about that. We knew about different ones that maybe pushed that forward. And then with Dr. Terry Wall's lifestyle changes, that was intriguing to me because she could address some of the mobility issues at the same time and also apply these dietary changes that were attainable for me. I'm like, okay, I understand. So she gave a lot of recipes for smoothies because I wasn't able to stand for a long time. And she talked about these 9 cups, so I'm starting to understand this. She gave a ketogenic version of what she did, which is where I went because I was trying to do keto and it wasn't working properly, but she gave me that path of understanding how to adjust carbs appropriately. So all of that with intermittent fasting, I just was like, whoosh. I probably did too much at the same time.
Yeah, but it's trial and error, right?
That's the whole, it was just a giant experiment to see. And there was just new things that no one had ever told me about before.
And at this point, were you able to kind of start weaning yourself off doctor prescribed medications?
Yes. I had already kind of done that before because I was so fed up. Nothing was working. I was taking a lot more over-the-counter stuff at that point, especially even when the rheumatologist told me, because I was managing severe pain. She just told me to take like 2 Aleve 4 times a day, basically, because this is when they started to stop really prescribing pain medication for people as well. And so I had just already kind of been off this stuff, except for I was taking Pepto-Bismol like non-stop though. But I was able to do different things with the supplements, and then eventually months later with lifestyle changes of food, that really helped a lot.
Yeah, so which lifestyle changes and diet changes specifically worked for you? Can you maybe describe kind of a typical day of what really does work?
I bumped up my good fats. So when we talk about some of the keto aspects, we're really making sure it's nutrient dense. So there's a lot of bad information on keto where you're getting a lot of inflammatory food. So I went more with the Wall's Protocols approach. And she has 3 different levels, so I could oscillate between maybe the second and third, which are the most types of restrictive. But she has her keto version and then her paleo version of hers, and which includes a lot of good fats. And like I have to use, because I am an ApoE4 carrier as well for Alzheimer's, that I do more of the olive oils, avocados. I switched out my bananas, which I was snacking on all the time, for avocados.
Right.
So I wasn't I wasn't getting these crashes, which was driving everybody around me a little nutty when you have these shakes. Like you don't eat it every 2 hours, so you get grumpy and you shake and have crashes. So that really changed. More veggies. So she has 3 cups of leafy greens, 3 cups of sulfur-rich foods, and 3 cups of colors. So I was starting to really follow that mindset. And those greens, I didn't realize I was actually missing a lot of leafy greens in my life. And I had to do it blended because I was having stomach issues, or steaming it, which isn't necessarily the best for leafy greens, but it helped. It worked. Mixed in with the good fats, something was changing. And I remember that day, especially when I had my bulletproof coffee in the morning, and then I had this fat green smoothie for lunch.
Yeah.
I picked up my laundry basket like I was Hercules. I had never done that before because I always felt like my arms were going to fall off every time I did laundry. But I was so shocked. I was like, oh, I'm getting my strength back. I was ecstatic.
Isn't that mad? Actually, when you think about it, quite small changes, isn't it? A green smoothie and a fat-rich coffee.
I know, I couldn't believe it. It's just, but I never noticed how much strength I had lost because just trying to do laundry before, I'd go down, I'd have to pick up the basket to try to even go down the stairs. And by the time I'd finish laundry, I'd be sitting in the laundry basket. I could be, or lying flat on the floor. There was no way. I hated doing all that stuff. I could barely move. But this was so different. I picked it up and was like, oh, what a difference. I'm like, I'm stronger.
And then since that point, do you still have relapses? Would you say you're cured, or you're just in a position where you're constantly managing your pain?
I'm managing it. I feel better than I ever did before, which is incredible because now that I've turned 40, I feel better than I ever did.
But you're not 40, you look incredible.
Thank you. But I feel better. So this aging, because I felt like I was 80 years old when I was in my 20s. I mean, I was wearing Depends because I had leakage and all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
But, you feel like you're already really old. So to get this back, and managing it, I don't want to lose it again. So implementing it, obviously with the pandemic, it's been tricky because I can't do what I wanted to do. I try to grow my own food. I started to do more of that, but even that's been hard this past year to get the food that I need. So I've been strategizing and kind of moved a little bit more back to paleo, or trying to give myself some of the comfort foods in a paleo version, which it's a little bit maybe too many carbs for me, but you have to adapt.
That's interesting. So why has the pandemic meant that you can't eat the normal foods that you would choose?
I was used to going to the farmer's market to get a lot more food, and so for a while they closed it down, or now you have to wait 45 minutes to an hour just to get in. So and then groceries, we had a lot of problems here with delivery of groceries. I mean, we could go into grocery stores, but the lines were so long for waiting, and I'm like, is this worthwhile or delivery? So, and the produce, you have someone else shopping for you at this point, so.
And are you constantly looking to kind of evolve the biohacks that you use? Are you always kind of keeping diaries and track of what your body's feeling and saying, and then making little tweaks here and there? Is it kind of an evolving process?
Constantly, especially with how I feel, because there's some instances, I think even in 2019, where I did get the flu and took a long time to recover from that. So, I mean, it's just constant. There's all these instances of why am I still feeling a little bit more fatigued? There's just been a lot of stress, so I have to acknowledge that and maybe add in some more stress management techniques as opposed to some of the other supplements. So it's always evolving when it comes to this.
Well, it's so amazing to see the success that you've had from treating yourself with these fairly holistic approaches, and get yourself to a point where you're pretty well in the grand scheme of things, right? Do you think that anybody can use biohacking to optimize their health?
I think for this tool, again, it's just giving patients back their power.
Yeah.
And understanding there is stuff, it's tricky because each of us are going to be different in what we choose. And also recognizing that it might take multiple things. I know some people feel better just by taking out gluten and they feel extraordinary. For me, I didn't feel the effects right away. So I had to do something more. And so this is where it gets complicated and frustrating for all of us, because we try one thing, it doesn't work fully, so we give up. But we have to add combinations. It's multifactorial, which makes it much more difficult because we don't have a plan then. I mean, there's aspects that we can try when it comes to getting better sleep, changing our diet around, but we have to fiddle with it and experiment to see what really works.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of stress management and sleep management. What kind of tools do you implement personally for those things?
A lot of sleep hygiene. I had to be really strict. I used to stay up till 3:30 in the morning, which wasn't good. On the computer working. I spent just all that time, but I had to really shut my computer off at a certain time. So I definitely try not to go past 7 p.m. I wear some amber glasses. I do some relaxation exercises before I get in bed. I make sure that nobody brings me stress, but after late at night. So with my boyfriend, I'm like, please don't have these conversations with me.
Yeah.
Close to bed. Cell phone is definitely a way. I make sure in the morning when I wake up, I do not touch my cell phone first thing in the morning. I go have my coffee. I do my breathing exercises before I touch my cell phone.
And what would your advice be for anybody looking to explore the biohacking world?
I think it's a lot of research, but there's good information out there, and follow someone that's intrigued you a little bit and kind of stick to that. I mentioned a couple of even the protocols. I've been so inspired by Dr. Terry Walls as well, and she has this amazing group and conference of people where they've from all autoimmune conditions, they really feel better. I'm just incredibly impressed with all the work that the patients have done to get themselves from, using mobility devices in a wheelchair or a walker to like feeling better and not needing those devices anymore.
Yeah, so talking about patient advocacy and patient empowerment, you've been on this kind of, nearly 3-decade long journey, which for a long time was very much you on your own, and then it was the discovery of people like Dave Asprey and Terry Walls who helped you, but really you didn't have this community, and now you're dedicating your life to helping people that were in a similar position, right? So you're a health coach and you've set up Support Fibro, a non-profit. So can you talk to us a bit about the work you're doing to get the conversations going, what you're lobbying for?
Support Fibro was a vision. I didn't want to start a nonprofit. I was very avoiding that issue. And I think in 2016, when I was really losing my health, I went on the road and I visited a lot of advocates around the country. I think one you might be familiar with Brandy Clevenger, being Fibro Mom, who writes for the UK Fibromyalgia Magazine. I convinced her to meet with me for coffee. She thought I was a spammer at first. I said I was going to be in South Carolina, come visit, or Julie Ryan from Counting My Spoons. I went to Alabama, and I really asked them, do we need to have another nonprofit? Is there stuff that are missing from the fibromyalgia community? Like, what do we need to get done? What do you think? And I learned a lot from them, and from there, a lot of us, I teamed up with Brandy to start Support Fibromyalgia Network. And we started it in 2017 as a nonprofit to fill in the gaps and also make sure we support our advocates and our community members. I wanted to leave, I guess I didn't know what was going on because I mentioned that the doctor just told me I didn't know how long I was going to live.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to leave the fibromyalgia community. Like had to be something that we could do, and I could give people this vision of some hope at least. Or I was seeing all these comments on social media and I was getting really upset because why was this happening? So that's where we started with the organization, and a lot of it in the original form, we focused on patient education. I really wanted to get medical education because these doctors, I really wanted them to understand fibromyalgia. It's real. We need the help that we need. I see patients discounted anymore. I kind of hit a wall with medical education for a little bit.
Right.
And then in my journey, I went to become a health coach. I thought about going to medical school, but it's going to take too long. And it was really expensive. But I became a health coach to try to bridge the gap between the patients and the providers. So this is where that all came in. And in the meantime, I was trying to get research going, and I'm realizing we have really low funding of research here, but in order to do that, you have to do advocacy. So that's where that came in, of launching this Fibromyalgia Advocacy Day with advocates at Capitol Hill. I had never gone to Capitol Hill before to do this work, and I just had to organize it. So we accomplished a lot, but there's still so much more to do.
Yeah, so what's the ultimate goal with it? Like how you know when you can't really achieve advocacy, can you? Getting everybody to know about it.
We're trying to increase funding at the NIH for sure for fibromyalgia specific research. We definitely want to push for different research that we need. I love the work that Dr. Younger is doing for our community and showing neuroinflammation so that we can address like where this root cause is coming from for fibromyalgia. I saw other communities. We work a lot with lupus communities. So I saw lupus, I see Lyme, I see ME/CFS. They're making headway with getting increases in budget. So why can't we do it for fibromyalgia? So that's definitely one goal. We are launching an ECHO, which I'm excited about for medical education. We'll see how that goes with Project ECHO.
Why do you think that it's so much trickier for fibro to kind of get the support and the research necessary where other chronic hidden conditions are managing to do that? Like, what's the sticking point?
We have a lot to prove. I think we have a lot of groundwork to make up. I thought stuff was getting done, but I'm noticing it wasn't. And then the categorization, I think there's been some movement just to place fibromyalgia completely in the chronic pain budgets of the NIH, we noticed, where it's like we know we want to move it back to its own category where fibromyalgia gets the funding directly. And I think in my mind, I feel if we get better research for fibromyalgia, we can help the chronic pain community much better than where it's kind of going. We have a lot of polarizing conversations right now with chronic pain. So I'm trying to get fibromyalgia really the center of focus, just like our other friends in lupus, Lyme. Like they got really big budget increases. So let's do this. I mean, fibromyalgia is really underfunded for the amount of people that have been diagnosed with it.
Because ultimately you want a specific definition for it, or it to fall specifically in a category, be like it's definitely neurological, it's definitely rheumatological.
Correct. We need consistent information across the board so that everybody, even internationally, has consistent information that they can use. Doctors can understand and work off of treatments. I know treatments are all over the board and it's showing that they're really ineffective. We also have a new problem here as far as rheumatology university centers. If you already previously are diagnosed with fibromyalgia, they're not treating fibromyalgia patients anymore. So rheumatologists are now deferring to other providers to manage fibromyalgia care, which has been completely different. We've always gone to rheumatologists to get a diagnosis and get treatment, but that's changing and it's changing really rapidly. And the thing that they're citing is lack of research for treatments. So we need to take care of that right away.
It's a real catch-22. In the kind of, since 1994, have you seen any progression at all, really? It kind of sounds like there hasn't really been much headway except for Support Fibro coming in 2017.
I'm trying not to be so cynical. I mean, there's more public awareness. The one thing I would love for is to really just never have anyone ask us again if fibromyalgia is real. That would be fantastic. Like, yes, we have a real diagnosis, which, I mean, people ask me that too after I introduce them that I'm the executive director of this. They're like, well, fibromyalgia isn't real. I was like, did they just say that? I run an organization for fibromyalgia and you just said that to me. So it's frustrating at times.
So frustrating, yeah.
We do have big goals, and how can we really support the patient community and get people the resources that they need? I think with this pandemic, it showcased a lot of the healthcare issues with insurance. And I mean, this is again the problem if they're deferring to other providers. If the primary care is not trained in fibromyalgia and then there's other specialists, you're probably paying out of pocket for a lot of other things, which is great if you can do naturopathic medicine and all that. They have wonderful treatment aspects for us, but a lot of it is out of pocket. And how many people can continue to afford that?
No, exactly. It needs the funding, it needs the research. In terms of your own kind of research, have you come to kind of any personal conclusions about the root cause or anything? You spoke earlier about being an overachiever, and I know that there's some bodies of research that kind of link the two, that people who are very active and, are academic and sporty to a higher level than the norm tend to sometimes fall into a category of things like ME and fibro. What's your take on that?
I think I agree with us pushing ourselves too hard. I think I'm more on the biological side of things, biochemical, and I study all the genetic pathways all the time. I know personally now, looking at my strategy and report, which I had added in, I was born with a slow genetic processing system. And so I understand now why things are kind of happening. And I would love more research on brain health.
Yeah.
That's one area I'm really fascinated with. And we've joined up with a lot of brain health organizations that are doing some research to see if we can get more looking at neuroinflammation better, seeing if there's other genetic components to that. What is the neurological component? And is there even a family system? Like if people have relatives who have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, and then we're diagnosed with fibromyalgia, is that even prevalent at all? Because we see a lot of overlap in lupus,
Yeah.
and a lot of the autoimmune conditions. So all of that research, I'd love to see more of, about.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of work to be done, but you're pushing things forward, and they're lucky that this happens. In a weird way, it's kind of defined your life in a positive way, having fibro, because you set up this amazing cause. You're going to be helping so many people. 2020 was obviously a bit of a dud year, and probably kind of put a lot of obstacles in the way of the work that you planned. What's the plan for this year?
A lot of virtual. So I love to get on the road and tour and talk to people in person. So we were traveling a lot. And so I'm disappointed I don't get to meet people in person, but I've switched gears to virtual. I think I got used to it because that's how I survived as a career. I was doing a lot of tech support at home.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with technology and doing virtual. And then we can reach more people. So it was an exciting change to see and make a difference that way. So we're gonna test a lot of virtual events. Right now, we launched the Fibromyalgia Impact Tour. So we're gonna be talking about food insecurity, health and wellness, how to cook, recipe swaps, organic gardening, finding community gardens in your area and CSAs, and just trying to help all the chronic illness community that way.
Oh, amazing. And for people listening, how can they get involved or learn more about your work?
It's fine. With supportfibro.org is our website, but we're really active on social media. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We've been doing a lot of video. A lot of our content is video. So that's just search Support Fibromyalgia as our handle.
Okay. And that's across all platforms?
Except for Twitter. Twitter is Team Fibro. So
Okay. Perfect.
We weren't able to acquire Support Fibromyalgia, but we have a lot of campaigns we go and we highlight a lot of our advocates in the community, which is important. And so that's a part of the Impact Tour. We're going to be doing a lot of interviews with local organizations, other nonprofit organizations that you may not have heard of before, because there's a lot of amazing people doing work on the ground level, or support group leaders. I feel like they're kind of in the trenches with us, and they have a lot of information to share. And so I appreciate them so much because they bring so much value of what the community is like at that level, and can support them as much as we can. And that's what it's, making an impact.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're building a global community now, and maybe actually the pandemic and having to be more virtual means that you can actually reach more people than ever.
Oh, it's been fun. We did an interview with someone in Taiwan. She's like the go-to advocate, My Several Worlds. And so we had a great interview with her as well. So we can reach more people.
Yeah.
I think we need to do more things internationally and work together. Rather than working in silos, it's time for us to just do more effort together, unite, and then take action, because we're a big community. If we come together, I think changes will happen a lot faster.
That was a very impactful statement to end on. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
I just want people in the fibromyalgia community to know that there's a group of us working really hard all over the world. So please, find hope and join us and reach out to other advocates, because it's important that you stay connected to the community and don't give up. We're working really hard. I tell people that this is my bucket list. So I made it this far. I got my health back. So I'm not giving up on the community, and I'm going to do this as long as it takes.
Melissa, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be on the podcast. I appreciate it.